Now, you will have made a Larp. And what does that Larp actually contain? I mean, if we were saying 48 hours from now, we're going to make a book. We would know it would have pages, page numbers, it would have letters that combine into words, often chapters are useful, and an index page is useful. You don't usually need to explain this because everybody knows what a book is. With Larp, it's somewhat more tricky. It's not universally known what it is. And even those who are very familiar with Larp keep debating, is this a Larp, is that a Larp, what is Larp, what is the essence of Larp? I can warn you now that I tend to be theoretical, this is going to be useful and practical. So if I begin talking about subjective diegesis construction, then just go, hey! So I'm going to talk about what are kind of the pages, the chapters, what you need to have in 48 hours to say, we have a Larp, we have designed a Larp. And of course, coming from the Nordic tradition, that's difficult because we keep challenging that. We say, oh, a Larp always has a group of people, and somebody is like, oh, I'll have a Larp, one person in a closet. A Larp at least always has some kind of interaction. Let's put 5 people in a room and order them to be silent and not interact. That's a Larp. You know? So there are exceptions to everything I'll talk about, but we'll forget that for now. You're allowed to deviate from it when you decide, but for simplicity's sake. This is a player. It could be you. Quite a few. You maybe had your first experience with Larp this summer at the summer school. Some of you might have done it a bit before. How many, just a quick show of hands, how many, when attending their first Larp or their most recent Larp, felt completely confident and secure and absolutely certain they would totally rock this role-playing thing? I'm seeing not a single hand. I've been at it for 20 years. Every Larp begins with like this powerful moment of anxiety. I mean, this is me, this is you, this is how most of us feel when we enter a Larp. It's scary. And we have a number of questions that we need to ask and we need to get answered before we can even begin role-playing. What is this thing that I'm going to play? Where does it happen? Who am I supposed to be, and how do we do this thing anyway? Remember these questions, because if you can answer these 4 questions, you have a Larp. What, where, who, and how. Now, what are we going to be doing? What am I going to play? Anyway. There are 3 simple things to remember when you need to answer the what question. First of all, you need a pitch. Just answers player's question. The pitch is, you'll be making pitches very soon, but basically you tell people what this is, and maybe you also convince them why it is interesting for you. And if you can do that, then that guy in the left corner will maybe begin smiling a bit, if they can relate to this pitch. Secondly, you need to have some kind of structure for this, at least a time structure. In the kind of Larps we'll be doing here, there usually is, no rule without exception, but there usually is something that happens before you actually begin role-playing. And we call that pre-brief, and if it involves crawling around on the floor and stuff like that, we often call it a workshop, which is short for drama workshop. And that tends to happen with all the players present, and goes on for as long or as little time as you need. Some of these have like 5 minutes pre-brief to 5 days of Larp, and some have 2 hours of pre-brief to half an hour of role-playing. But there's always something that comes in advance. And as a designer, that is something you can prepare for. Then there is the actual play, the Larp situation, theory, the actual role-playing. And then that's over, and then we have some activities together that help us reconnect with the real world, begin processing what we learned or what we experienced when role-playing, meet each other's people again, maybe analyze, and that part is called a debrief. And then I hit an extremely important word down here in this box, activity. If I'm going to be secure at your Larp, I need to have some kind of idea of what I will be doing. Are we going to sit down around a table and eat dinner? Okay, then I can prepare for that. I feel comfortable at a dinner table. This chills me. Are we going to be fishermen fishing? Are we going to be warriors fighting? Are we going to be ninjas sneaking around in tunnels? Are we going to be hyper-intelligent shades of the color blue? going around being hyper-intelligent. That might be a bit difficult, but we can work with that. You know? But when you design the LARP, you need to have a clear idea of what exactly is it that players will be doing in the LARP. And sometimes you can reveal it to them one stage at a time. Like you'll be hyper-intelligent colors of the shades of the color blue, and here, after the LARP begins, you introduce hyper-intelligent shade of the color purple. Draw. That was a very brief summary of how to answer the what question. Then we have the where question. Obviously, I need to know that the LARP is going to be, for example, in this room, as opposed to, say, in New York, so I can get to the location. But I also need to have an idea of what are we going to use this room that we are in for. If we were LARPing in this room, is the whole room a part of the LARP? All of it, the walls and everything? Or is there a line here, like the LARPing happens here, so these people are in character now, and this is the not LARPing area? Is this room going to be the Titanic? How does it represent the Titanic? Are we in the ballroom of the Titanic, or is there like the captain's quarters over there, and here's the deep down on the bellies of the ship where they throw coal into big things? You know? Well, maybe we'll need to use some tape to mark that. And then we also need to think about the aesthetics of the space. Like, what does it look like? What does it feel like? And some of this is a bit intuitive, like the sensation of this table. This table is telling me something. This is a conference table. I'm not in somebody's home with this table. I might be in their office. Now, all of this stuff influences how we play. So as LARP designers, we need to think about how to use space. And when we're designing for rerunability, we can't always control it. But then we can also often think about, okay, what are the instructions I would give to people so that I can adapt any space to fit my LARP? Like draw tape on the floor, make sure it's dark, no light outside, light single candle in the center of the room. This kind of stuff can be done in any room. But then we introduce our players to this space. And then what we tell them about what this space is to be used for determines a great deal of stuff about the LARP. Now up there you see 4 players. You can recognize those are people, you know, and they're holding cocktail glasses. So if we say that this LARP is happening at a cocktail party, right, that allows for certain kinds of activity, certain ways of behaving. And below there, if we instead of saying it's a cocktail party, it's a medieval battlefield. You know, immediately we're changing what is going on in the LARP. Often we're a bit more specific than that. We're saying, okay, this is a cocktail party at a fancy hotel in Vilnius, featuring the elite of the cricket playing community. And it's 2016. Or this is the Battle of Hastings in the year 1026, historians don't arrest me. These are the armies that are present and stuff like that. And this information we call the setting. What's the setting of your LARP? Well, it's a cricket player elite cocktail party. It's a battlefield. And the setting, of course, determines how you read the room. This is Titanic. This is a cocktail party location. It determines what the space begins meaning to the players. I put this tiny little word up there, world. In some schools of LARP design, you'll hear a lot of talk about world, and in some very little. It depends a lot on the LARP. But if we're going to be in Tolkien's Middle-earth, in the 4th age, right after Aragorn is crowned king, then the world matters a great deal. Because if I'm not familiar with the world, I won't know how to react when somebody comes in and says, "I'm the king of the Rohirrim!" Okay, what does that mean? Are you a good guy, or do I like you? I mean, king, is there a king? You know, all of that stuff needs to be established. But if we're hyper-intelligent shades of color blue, it's probably best not to talk about the world. But the world is basically everything that's outside of the setting, which contains the setting. And then we come to the most interesting question. Who am I going to be? We ask as anxious players. So anyone remember my 3 rules from Larpwriter Summer School? I have a presentation character design. Clarity, connectivity, and activity. And the clarity thing is quite important. I need to clearly understand who I'm supposed to be when I'm role-playing. And if I've never role-played before, I might need even more information. Okay, you're going to pretend to be Napoleon Bonaparte. You're going to pretend to be the beautiful Helen of Troy. And this person you're pretending to be is the character. But let's say we have a LARP with 5 characters, and one of them is the lion tamer. Okay, you can define the lion tamer. I can work with the idea of being a lion tamer. I can have a cool whip and go around maybe sometimes speaking Lionese. But this is not information for me to know how to play meaningfully as this LARP, because the 4 other characters, now let's say they are a clown, an elephant tamer, and 2 acrobats. Fine, okay, now I'm beginning to see what kind of interactions my character can have. I can talk with these other circus people about being in a circus and so on. Or the 4 other characters could be Lion 1, Lion 2, Lion 3, and Lion 4. Now we have some very different interactions. So the character only begins making sense together with the cast, the other characters, complete set of characters that are in the LARP. And with their relations between them. And this we could almost give as an extra question from our confused player. How do I relate to the other people who are here? To provide relations to your characters is basically answering that question. You can do it by saying, okay, you like this person, you don't like that person, you've known this person since childhood, sit down for 3 hours and talk about everything you have experienced together and what you do on your time off. Or you can simply say, none of you know each other, and this is how you say hello. But you need to answer that question. How do I relate to the other people who are in this LARP when we are playing? There are more, but there are 3 common ways of doing this, of answering the questions about who am I going to be and how am I going to relate to the others. You can give people thin characters. In a way, that's what we got. That's what we got in the very beginning when Christopher said, okay, we're going to wake up and crawl around. We're going to be animals in the dark. You know, and then we have a basic frame, a social role. Our social role permits us to crawl around blind on the floor. And apart from that, we use whatever comes up from our own creativity. Or we can make it thicker. And then there are 2 ways that have a huge influence on how your LARP plays out. You can co-create the characters, which is what we started doing when we were going around exploring each other in the dark and interactions, and you begin hearing sounds. And then you can begin adding, okay, I think my animal is a bat, because my animal is doing this kind of thing. So you can use workshop and drama techniques to help people develop their own character interpretations, starting from a common multiple. Or you can pre-write the characters. For those who have been to summer school, which is almost everyone who has participated in the summer school, that's what we practiced in the character writing workshop. And when you pre-write them, you need to think about also the cast and relations. Then we come to the how question, and this is the most difficult question to answer. How do we role-play? I'm going to give you 3 hooks to answer this. The first is the element of style. There's not just one way to role-play. Exactly how many different ways to role-play there are, nobody has counted them, nobody has made like very neat boxes that this is that style and this is that style. But we also role-play differently. Role-play means different things at different LARPs. If you want a comedic LARP, you can adopt this principle from theatre sports of always say yes. So, Ireland, how's that circus going that you started last year?
Yes, it's going great.
So then he could respond by asking me, do you enjoy life as a bat? And I'll have to accept that, yeah, I'm a bat. You know? And this trains you for a certain kind of role-playing, one with often low resolution, but where things easily become funny. Or we can prepare our players by saying, okay, sit down, meditate, think carefully about an important childhood memory for your character. What does your character feel like when it breathes? You know, this kind of thing. And then you're opening up for a slower, more introspective, more nuanced style of play. And a part of style is also like what we share of goals of playing. Like when we Nordics work with American LARPers, we sometimes say, play to lose. This is not entirely true, but for people who come from the traditional American LARP, there are many American LARPs, but the traditional American LARP has strong elements of game. It is competitive. You can earn experience points, you can outsmart your opponents, you can win. So by saying play to lose, it can be really cool to lose. Try to explore losing. Then we're readjusting the play style towards something that might work for our school of LARPing. Then you have the techniques, including but not limited to meta techniques. You remember from New Voices in Art, clinging on the glass. Remember from the Dream Cafe. It's Night Cafe, right? Yes, Night Cafe. How to be a weaver. You're still using that? Yeah. These are, we can bundle them together as techniques. There are certain ways of playing, certain mechanisms that occur in your LARP. And there are a lot of different ones, of different styles, and often inventing a good technique is kind of the core of your LARP design. A lot of LARPs are identified by their technique in the way that New Voices in Art is the plinging on the glass. That's at the heart of it. And then we have safety. We have some rules for safety, like, well, we don't actually punch each other in the face for real. You know? If your character is going to fight, then we pretend, we try not to hurt each other. We can give out safety rules for that. We can remind people of the right to opt out and the necessity of opting out. We can talk with people about calibration, how we agree on an appropriate way, an appropriate level of intensity between us. There are many things we can talk about in the safety department, and it matters for two reasons. One is that we actually want our players to be safe. The other is, if I'm going to join in this crazy role-playing thing, I need to feel safe. Which means that everything we're saying and writing and telling our players needs to somehow contribute to this feeling of we can trust each other. I've got your back. If something goes wrong, these are nice people who will pick up and help each other. And in the heart of this triangle, I put the innocent word rules, because a lot of this actually comes down to rules. And again, there are many kinds of rules. No complete list exists. But often if we say, when somebody plings your glass, then you will give it in your monologue, that's a rule. If someone says cut, then we will immediately stop role-playing and solve the emergency, that's also a rule. So rules often come in the form of, if something happens, then we must. And there are a limited amount of rules that can be stored in the player's mind, so choose them carefully, and remember to practice them. And finally, the most fascinating question of all, which I shall not answer, because you have a whole weekend to answer this. Why? What is it this play can give me? What is the meaning of this LARP? What is the theme? What is the action that will happen here, and how does it relate to our human existence, etc., etc.? What is the meaning of life? I often ask that question after playing, don't you? But we have 48 hours to come up with a LARP that gives players a convincing why. And finally, in terms of making progress in this sprint of role-playing design, I've been in many different LARP design groups, and we've always worked in different ways. At the Larporatory, you will work in a specific way, but sometimes you get stuck. What you do when you get stuck, and these are the things I found that are universals in different LARP design processes, that the techniques to become unstuck are often the same. What can we remove from this LARP without losing its essence? Okay, if we take away the 4 lions, is this still about the existential crisis of the lion tamer? Yeah, okay, we don't need the lions to do that. If we take away the lion tamer, no, we're losing something. Another way of saying this is kill your darlings. Sometimes you can sneak the darlings back in, but it's worth considering what is the essence here? What is the core of this design? Is it really necessary to discuss this? This applies to group design processes. Discussion takes a lot of time. It can be very useful. I'm not saying don't discuss. And so sometimes you have to both bring forth arguments about this, arguments about that, and then we come to an understanding of each other, or we figure out what the better option is. Sometimes discussion is the right thing to do, but we tend to overuse it. can we act it out instead? Can we just sit down and write down our ideas on paper and then share those pieces of paper instead of going like word, 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 word? Can we test it? Always a worthy question to ask. And finally, and I don't know why this works, but it always works. If you're stuck creatively with something, anything, if you're writing an article, if you're designing a website, if you're designing a Larp, what happens if you turn it upside down? And figuring out what does upside down mean for this is part of what makes it work, I suspect. If we turn it upside down, then we can often begin seeing it for what it truly is. And those were my 15 minutes, I believe. Thank you very much, and good luck with it.